Gentlemen of the House, Mr. Speaker, at this time, please recognize Representative Holt for House File 889 and Representative Gobble for Senate File 243.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Crawford for opening remarks on House File 889.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the House. House File 889 is an act prohibiting the mandatory disclosure of whether a person has received a vaccination for COVID-19. New Section 27B.1 prohibits the state or any political subdivision from including on an identification card issued by the state or political subdivision from containing information as to whether the holder of the ID card has received a vaccination for COVID-19. New Section 27B.2 prohibits a business or governmental entity from requiring customers, patrons, clients, patients, or other persons to furnish proof of a COVID-19 vaccination. It does not prohibit the implementation of COVID-19 screening protocols that do not require proof of vaccination, such as, for example, a temperature check. This section also states that grants or contracts funded by state revenue shall not be awarded or renewed if a business or governmental entity violates this section. The bill defines business and governmental entity as they pertain to this section. Healthcare facilities are not included in the provisions of this bill due to their unique mission requirements. The bill will take effect upon enactment. This concludes my opening remarks. Mr. Chair, there are amendments.
There are amendments. Will the clerk call up the first amendment?
H1431 by Shipley of Van Buren.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Van Buren for opening remarks on amendment H1431. Is the gentleman in the chamber? All right, well, we will move on to discussion for the amendment. Is there discussion on amendment H1431? Chair recognizes the gentleman from Crawford, Representative Holt.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, not Mr. Chair, I apologize for that earlier slip of the tongue. Amendment 1431 guts the bill and removes important protections from Iowans. It would in effect allow government entities and businesses to use some other means of identification to discriminate against citizens based on COVID vaccination status. I would urge the body to resist this amendment. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the lady from Clinton, Representative Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So I actually support this amendment. I'm sorry. Oh, Representative Shipley is here now, so maybe he'll tell us more about it. But I've discussed the bill and specifically Section 2 of the bill, which is what this amendment strikes, with a lot of people, including a lot of attorneys. And while I am reasonably sure that the bill as it's written does exactly what Representative Holt says it does, I think there is some ambiguity in the drafting of Section 2 that could lead to questions and could lead to a lot of litigation. I know some of the attorneys in my caucus do not necessarily agree with my interpretation of the bill and or Representative Holt's interpretation of the bill. And I think, as we'd all agree, if you ask 20 attorneys, there may be 20 different opinions as to what, in fact, that language means. So because Section 2, I think, is not as clear as Section 1 of the bill, which prohibits vaccine passports, I support that provision. This amendment would leave that in there, but I do think that Section 2 needs some work, and since we do not have time at this point to clean it up to the point where everybody could be sure of exactly what it meant, I do support the amendment. I would recommend that my members vote yes. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the chair recognizes the gentleman from Van Buren, Representative Shipley, for closing remarks on amendment H1431.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Iowa House, Mr. Speaker, again, just thank you everyone for participating in such an important discussion for all of Iowa. I just want to stand here and express gratitude that I can stand here as a human being, a healthy human being, and exercise my rights, exercise my right to free speech, to assembly, to lawfully be here, unencumbered by a medical device, an obtrusive medical procedure. This is an extremely complex bill in its present form. House File 889 is only one page long, but don't let it fool you. It has significant repercussions on our entire society and all of human relationships moving forward. So the purpose of this amendment, and I hope I can earn your support, this bill has reached some controversy. There's some disagreement, a lot of unanswered questions. I'm still extremely confused on how these different ideas apply in the real world. And so I'm hoping that we have to do something. Everyone knows that this is a really hot issue and we have to do something. Something has to be done because Iowans are crying out against this system. And Governor Reynolds has already publicly proclaimed that vaccine passports will not be moving forward in Iowa. So what I'm hoping to accomplish with this amendment is simply that let's just get a tiny baby step forward. Let's just find the smallest piece that hopefully all of us can agree upon and just get that done. And let's just restart the discussion and really lead this discussion in a way that all Iowans can take part in it. I mean, again, this is complex legislation. I think we could probably behoove the state of Iowa and the body to spend longer than 1 week deliberating on how this bill actually impacts the lives of Iowans. And I think that's why this amendment is important, because the language presently in House File 889 has not gotten that full vetting from the public. I don't precisely know where it came from. I don't know who's insisting on what provision. I know I'm just very confused by the bill, but I know I want to do something, and I want to find something that all of us can agree upon. So that's the purpose of the amendment, is just kind of dial this back. Let's just start at the very basic step that the state of Iowa themselves will not be sanctioning these vaccine passports. That's what Section 1 of House File 889 does. So that's why this amendment stricts Section 2, and we can just have that, there's that space to restart the conversation, and we can take this one block at a time. Because let's face it, there are a million questions surrounding all of these issues: the pandemic response, the new technology on the market, and we need to answer all those questions. We can't be creating COVID code clutter with unclear definitions. I don't think that's the best way to legislate. So that's why I authored this amendment and would move the bill.
Gentleman moves Amendment H1431. All those in favor should vote aye. Division is requested by the gentleman from Floyd, Representative Pritchard, seconded by the lady from Polk Representative Converse. This is now a record roll call vote with the clerk open machine and receive your vote. Converse votes aye. Lundgren, no. Cisneros, aye. Morris Scott, no. Have you all now voted? Clerk, Rule 75 has been requested by gentleman from Florida, Representative Pritchard. Will the clerk call the members? Everyone else is previously excused. Representative Pritchard. Those voting aye, 43. Those voting no, 50. Absent or not voting, 7. The amendment has failed. Will the clerk call up the next amendment?
H1424 by Meyer of Polk.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Polk, Representative Meyer, for opening remarks on Amendment 1424.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to withdraw this amendment.
Gentleman asks unanimous consent to withdraw the amendment. Are there objections? Hearing none, so ordered. Chair recognizes the gentleman, will the clerk call up the next amendment?
H1421 by Shipley of Van Buren.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Van Buren, Representative Shipley, for opening remarks on Amendment H1421.
All right, ladies and gentlemen of the Iowa House, thank you, Mr. Speaker. So this amendment, let me just double check to make sure I speak accurately. So yes, this amendment would remove the exemption for healthcare facilities from the bill. And I think this is a really important thing that we all just think about in terms of what we're putting into code and how this would apply in the lives of Iowans. Vaccine passport system is incredibly coercive. The corporations and the governments that are unrolling this are using it as a tool to control their people, to control their movement, to control their access to civil society. And I believe that Iowans are free human beings. I believe that you're either a free human being or you're not. You know, there's not just some instances where you enjoy freedom and other instances where you don't get to enjoy those freedoms. You're a free human being, and your freedom does not, you don't check your freedom at the door when you walk into a healthcare facility. You're still a free human being when you walk through the door of a healthcare facility. And I think that's one of the reasons why this language needs to be struck, is because I'm looking at the definition of facility 514J.102. Facility means an institution providing healthcare services or a healthcare setting, including but not limited to hospitals and other licensed inpatient centers, ambulatory, surgical, or treatment centers, skilled nursing centers, residential treatment centers, diagnostic laboratory and imaging centers, and rehabilitation and other therapeutic health settings. So it's pretty broad as it is, but it says including but not limited to. So this is an incredibly open definition. The question I was asking was, does this apply to pharmacies? Because a pharmacy provides healthcare services. They administer healthcare. They administer vaccines, certainly, which is, I think, considered healthcare still. So I'm just, incredibly confused on that definition. How does that apply? And why are we having this exemption? What is the premise behind this? Where did this come from? And I think this is why it's so important that we follow the actual legislative process, that, you know, we write a bill, we debate it in public in front of broad daylight, we get more input, we take some time to really think through these things, to, you know, what do these words mean? How will it apply in society? What is the impact of putting this in code? Could there be unintended consequences, right? What could potentially come from this? I think there are a lot of questions. Again, this is a very, in my estimation, a very complex issue, and the bill is very poorly defined and does not do a very good job exploring those issues. So if I have a mother in a nursing home under this bill, would it be permissible for me to be required to get a COVID vaccination as a condition to visit my mother in that facility? My understanding of the legislation is yes, it would allow that. And that's why I believe that's an atrocious violation of human liberty, that, you know, your medical freedom could be sacrificed as a condition for wanting to visit a loved one in a healthcare setting. Or perhaps that someone could be denied care, admission. You know, there's, I think, certain laws saying you'd have to provide emergency care, but is that hospital or facility, are they required to admit you beyond that? Or would they require a vaccine? Would these vaccine passports in these healthcare settings, would they honor and respect an individual's religious or medical exemptions? I understand we want to protect people from COVID. I think everyone agrees that, you know, the sooner we can just move on and make sure people are healthy and secure, the better we are. But how much liberty are we willing to sacrifice for that security? And the last year shows that we're willing to sacrifice a lot of liberty for even the illusion of security. And is that sacrifice worth it? For me, no. I really value my liberty. I believe that where there is liberty, there is the Spirit of God, and that those who would take away my liberty are taking away my connection to God. And if I'm not going to live here as a free human being, is life worth living? Those are the questions I ask myself, right? I know not everyone approaches it the same way, but so I guess, why does a healthcare facility need the ability to exclude people based on vaccination status? Is it the position of this body, is it the position of Representative Holt that the vaccine is the best and only treatment for COVID? Is that the truth? That the only thing that'll get in the way of COVID is this vaccine. And we don't need to even pay attention to the Eli Lilly product or the other antibody products, non-vaccine products that are coming on the market. We don't have to pay attention to that because we have the vaccine. That's all we need. Don't need to mention vitamin D. In fact, some people like to make fun of people when they mention vitamin D. Certainly, hydroxychloroquine should never have been discussed, and ivermectin, nobody, all these things. So I could see a justification if it was true that these new vaccines, and God bless them, if these vaccines really do give a ticket to health, and if we can use these new experimental therapies to alter our DNA in a way that really promotes health, then God bless it. I'm so thankful for that we can just use our minds and technology to improve health. But is that all there is? Is that the only treatment? Is vaccine that's all that's available? And why would a healthcare facility feel the need to exclude me? So if it's true that these brand new vaccines provide, according to the corporate press releases, 100% protection, I'm just trying to talk through the medical theories on why a healthcare facility would want to exclude non-vaccinated people from the premises. And I understand there is a theory that unvaccinated people spread illness and disease. I've personally never seen that demonstrated or actually played out in fact. I haven't seen any evidence of that. I think it's entirely questionable whether or not in all communicable diseases, asymptomatic transition, sure, it occurs. It certainly occurs in the flu. That's been demonstrated. But it's not common. It's exceedingly rare. And I'm still going through as much COVID data as I can to make sense on how much disease is indeed transmitted by otherwise seemingly healthy people. I think that's a very important question that'll help guide these policies. And then I think the biggest question, if we're going to exclude non-vaccinated people from the premises to provide security, is it true that vaccinated people are not capable of transmitting illness? Or are vaccinated people definitely capable of transmitting illness, and that's why so many people are still wearing masks, and why Fauci said, even if you're vaccinated, you got to wear a mask, because God only knows you could bump into someone and just pass the virus along. And you would be asymptomatic because the gene therapy, helped your immune response, so you are infected, but you're not feeling it, and you're capable of transmitting asymptomatically. I believe that's the rationale for the CDC keeping a mask guidance for people who've been vaccinated. So, if it were true that a vaccinated person cannot transmit illness, that would be one thing. But that's not true. So I'm having a hard time understanding the medical justification of why we'd want to have this exemption for healthcare facilities. So, again, I'm just so confused on what the bill does. That's why I just want to slow this down, make sure we get it right, make sure we're leading this discussion in a way that all Iowans can take part, in a way that we can really assemble the most up-to-date science, the most up-to-date data on what are these new technologies, how effective are they, what is the risk for an unvaccinated person, how do we promote health overall? I think that's just the bigger discussion we need to have. So I think there's really no reason for healthcare facilities to be exempt. I'm having a hard time understanding the scientific rationale or theory on what the benefit of exempting that would be. And so I don't think it needs to be in there. I think it severely undercuts the medical freedom argument. I think this would codify, this language in here, I think would codify that, yes, that healthcare facilities can discriminate based on vaccination status. And I know there's arguments that, they can already do that. And yeah, that may be true. I think that needs to be litigated a bit further to see to exactly what extent that can happen. But under this, it would definitely be allowable. Definitely, that the exemption governs the rule, essentially. That yes, healthcare facilities, and this bill is passed, can absolutely implement a vaccine passport system. They can absolutely prevent non-vaccinated people. And how would that be enforced? How coercive was that? And I guess this is the thing, because I've been made fun of for mentioning Jacobson, Massachusetts, and saying, I don't understand what that case law means, being told that by people who haven't read the case, which is interesting. But part of that was the sacrifice for what is the penalty for denying a vaccine. In the Jacobson case, it was $5. This was a smallpox example. Smallpox is very...
Representative Shipley, you've reached 10 minutes on your opening remarks. Is there discussion? Chair recognizes gentleman from Crawford, Representative Holt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I don't believe that this bill in any way condones or encourages medical facilities to have a vaccine passport, nor does it codify discrimination. What it does do is allow our long-term care facilities, our health care facilities, to follow CDC guidelines and to do their best to protect our most vulnerable population. I understand this argument. I also understand that it is healthcare facilities, long-term care facilities, nursing home facilities' responsibility to protect their residents to the very best of their ability. And whether you believe that the vaccines work or not, I think there is some compelling scientific evidence that they do. There's some folks that think they don't. There's some folks that think they do. But the issue is, when you come down to it, these facilities are responsible for protecting that most vulnerable population. We know, regardless of how you feel about COVID-19, we are well aware that the most people who lost their lives were our elderly population, our most vulnerable populations, particularly those in long-term health care facilities. So yesterday, the CDC issued some new guidelines. One of them was that fully vaccinated staff members are now exempt from routine testing as required by county positivity rates. Fully vaccinated staff members, and so how would these healthcare facilities not know who's vaccinated if they can't ask the question or make a determination? CDC also issued some updated visitation guidance to include recommendations for long-term care facilities and to describe circumstances when source control and physical distancing are not required during visitation. And let me cover those. If both resident and family members who are visiting are fully vaccinated, there is now no requirement for social distancing or source control, which is face masks, during a visit if it is conducted in an area that does not include other residents or healthcare personnel. So my understanding in talking to a number of healthcare folks today, because I'm very sensitive to this argument, I understand that people don't want to have a vaccination in order to visit their loved ones in a long-term care facility or a nursing home. I get that. And I don't really think that's what the issue is here. What I believe, based upon talking to numerous folks in the healthcare, some folks in the healthcare profession, looking at these CDC guidelines, talking to some folks that represent the Hospital Association, is this flexibility is needed so that nursing homes, for instance, could establish different protocols. For instance, if you have the vaccination, you can go in without a mask, you can visit your loved ones, you can move about the facility freely, not a problem. Perhaps if you don't have the vaccination, you need to wear a mask, maybe not move around as freely, those type of protocols. So I don't think anymore that anyone is talking about you don't get to come into the facility if you don't have the shot or the vaccine, but rather some differing protocols. It is also true, like it or not, that beginning in October, the CDC wants to collect data from healthcare facilities in terms of who's been vaccinated and who's not. Again, I believe that is based upon trying to figure out what works and what doesn't in terms of vaccinations and other things. Most certainly, if this exemption were to lead, for instance, to a number of facilities saying you can't come in unless you have vaccination, then that's something we need to visit, most definitely. I do not condone that either. However, we do need to remember that these healthcare facilities' primary responsibility is to keep their residents healthy and safe. And how do they do that job if they cannot at least know whether somebody has been vaccinated or not and then be able to follow those CDC protocols? So I don't see this exception as codifying discrimination. I do not see this exception as condoning a vaccine passport, but rather giving our healthcare facilities the flexibility they need to protect our most vulnerable citizens. And if down the road we see this leading in a different direction, this body can come back and take action. So I would urge the body to resist this amendment.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Woodbury, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to thank Representative Holt for some of his comments, in particular about the responsibilities of healthcare facilities and who they're responsible to. Representative Shipley, I'm not going to ask you to yield, As you know, I was in the committee the other day, and I heard your testimony and many others. And quite frankly, I've received many emails like other legislators have. This bill needs to be amended or to kill the bill. And it'll be interesting to see what happens here. But I will say this, I voted for this in committee. And as I said, I listened to the people's concerns, and I think some of their concerns, I think they have fears and they have concerns that I don't share, but I have empathy for that. I get their concerns. But I will say if this amendment passes, I'm a no on the bill. I'm on the fence. And quite frankly, the supporters that were in that meeting between some of the things they're saying push me over on the other side. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and I had to bite my tongue during committee. We were in there long enough, and I'm not going to do a rebuttal on every piece of misinformation I heard, but I thought what was alarming in the committee, and this is not directed at you, you did not do what I'm going to say here. What I found alarming there and in some of these emails, especially the ones that have gone off script, is the aggressive nature towards healthcare facilities and really just some downright mean things. And if there's any profession out there, we talk a lot about back the blue, but we all be back in the white right now. You know, have we forgotten 14 months ago? Think about 14 months ago, Representative Shipley, you weren't in this chamber. You hightailed it out of Des Moines because of COVID. Session was over. People were scared. We were talking about flattening the curve. And who did we put our trust in? Who did I put my trust in? The healthcare profession. They were on the front line. They're still on the front line. And I get some of these emails, and I heard it in the committee meeting, people are taking shots at healthcare professionals. It's the old story, you can bust a cop's chops, but who are you going to call when you're getting in trouble? You call the police. When you're sick, who are you going to call? You go to the healthcare facility. My total respect and admiration to all those out on their front line. When I was seeing what was going on in New York City, and they were putting out the call for respirators, and then I look back in Iowa and people aren't wearing masks, and in vaccine denial, we didn't have vaccine 14 months ago, and when I looked in the committee the other day, and not one person back in that audience had a mask on. This isn't just about vaccines. I got a mask. Going into a healthcare facility over a mask, being asked to wear a mask in a healthcare facility, right along with vaccines. So I get it. It's not just about vaccines. It's also about masks. But I'm here to say thank you to the healthcare profession. And what gets lost in that is the mental health care profession. We've seen suicides go up in this state in the last 14 months. People of all ages are suffering mentally. Our healthcare professionals, our police officers, what segment of society hasn't been impacted? And then we get worried about having to wear a mask at a healthcare facility. Are you kidding me? And I heard people talking about how they couldn't see their loved ones, and Representative Holtz kind of pointed that out. Yes, that is gut-wrenching. And I feel badly for her. No grandpa should have to put his hand up against the window. And I heard a person say I couldn't go without the mask. And you do understand the healthcare facilities and the assisted living, it's for the patient. It's not for you or for them. The people that want to go but they don't want to get vaccinated, but I have my right to go infect a whole bunch of other people in the hospital. I just think there's a little reality check that needs to be had there. I'm not advocating mandatory vaccines, but I am advocating common sense and a respect for our healthcare providers who are still there. And if you have any doubts, you want to do some research, Representative Shipley, look what's going on in India right now. I know it's a long ways away, It's crazy over there. They don't have respirators. They don't have oxygen. Where are people turning? They're dying in the streets. They don't have enough health care professionals. So you can have all the faith you want in liberty and other sources and alternatives, but I tell you what people need in India right now and in a lot of places in the United States, they need oxygen. That's kind of a key to life, Representative Shipley. So as I said in committee, and this is all I'm not going to talk on the final comments. Yeah, I understand the fears and the concerns, and I'm not in favor of mandatory vaccinations. And I see some of these emails saying, well, they're violating my privacy at medical facilities. I went in for an annual physical the week ago Friday, and I have to laugh. I don't know how many of you go in, you get the iPad now, and I'm kind of technically challenged, and ... and 2 columns, 3 columns. Have you ever had this? ... They're asking for your private information. That's their job. It's just mind-boggling. It really is. So anyway, I understand the people's concerns, and I understand their fears, but I also understand those of us who are going out there and getting vaccinated, getting our 2 shots or whatever it takes. That's how we get people to visit their relatives in the hospitals. That's how you get people to visit their relatives in the nursing home facilities. And that also helps decreasing the mental wear and tear of those mental health and hospital people, the healthcare professionals. They're just under a tremendous amount of pressure. They are heroes. I go up in my district, up at the hospital, and the signs out there, everyday heroes, the healthcare workers. And there's a whole lot of people out there that could be doing a whole lot more to make their jobs easier in the healthcare profession if they just step up to the plate. It's not that hard. Get your shot. Everybody knows the mantra, get your shot, social distancing, wear a mask when you need to wear a mask, and wash your hands. So I thank every one of our healthcare providers. You don't deserve to be slandered down here or via email. So thank you again.
Chair recognizes the lady from Warren, Representative Bowden.
This is a very personal subject to me, and I appreciate everybody's comments. I think we all know that it's not lost on us that this has been a difficult year on many levels, and I think it's hit home today for me. I have a family member, I have a sister who's in a care center. And it was a very difficult time to not see her for 9 months, so I'm appreciative of vaccine and what's come forward and the ability for science to take place. But my struggle here is that if we're talking about protecting my sister, currently what happens is if somebody has COVID and there's an overrun in the hospital, they bring them to my sister's nursing home. So if we're talking about not letting somebody in who can't maybe get a vaccine because they have a health reason or a religious exemption or such, but we're going to let the COVID patients in, possibly, I'm really concerned about that direction. I'm also concerned that during a pandemic or executive orders, do those exemptions take place? Can somebody get in if they needed to, if they absolutely cannot, if they have a medical reason that they cannot get the vaccine? That's hugely concerning to me, because that could mean that any one of us could not see our family members in a hospital, in a care center, anywhere. I'm not saying that our medical field's going to do that to us, but none of us expected to be walking around in masks a year ago either. And so I like to place our legislation on making sure that we're protecting all citizens, not some citizens. And I want to make sure that in this coming year that there's no reason that I or anybody else can't go in and see their family members and do it in the most respectful, responsible way, and while making sure that we don't take away the rights of people in Iowa. I never want to have to walk in and show my papers. That's just really concerning to me. And while I respect everybody's position, and I know what we're trying to do here, we're moving a bill that will make a difference some places. It needs to make a difference all places for me. So I appreciate the fact that this amendment is out there. I think we need to think about what this could hold in the future for us. And I certainly hope that it's true that if this does come to play where it comes back to bite us, that we will be back here revisiting it because we owe it to Iowa.
Seeing no further discussion, the chair recognizes the gentleman from Van Buren for closing remarks on Amendment 1421.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll try to be more collected with my comments here. It's just a really overwhelming topic, and there's just so much to discuss. There's so much to explore. There's so much to answer to. Representative Hansen's right. There's just so much conflicting information. I wouldn't necessarily describe it as misinformation, but there's conflicting information. You know, I'd really love to flesh out the comment that Representative Bohannon made on Monday about the usefulness of VAERS reporting. And I know it is a self-reporting passive system, but it's the only thing that the government's given us. So I don't think we can, you know, hold it against citizens when they use the tools that government gives them to evaluate some of these decisions. I think you're absolutely right about just respecting healthcare workers. I think that's why this healthcare facilities exemption is so important, because I'm sure you've seen the headlines as I have, is that, well, one, to start the premise the first, is absolutely the people in these facilities deserve protection. And I believe that was the rationale for making sure they had priority access to the vaccine for everyone who's an inpatient and everyone who works at the facility. I believe they were first in line. So to me, that indicates that everyone who's wanted this, to go this route, has had an option to pursue it. And thankfully, we can put our faith in Pfizer's 100% efficacy rating to know that these people are protected when they go this route. So why would they be so concerned about other people potentially spreading illness when, you know, the corporate press release tells us it works? Representative Holt, I just really appreciate your comments because it really illustrates why this language is so important to you, and it's because we're taking direction from the CDC, that we need to satisfy the CDC, we need to just march lockstep with anything they dictate, and we need to make sure that anything the CDC says, Iowans comply with. And that's why healthcare facilities are exempt in House File 889. But I have a different opinion of the CDC. You know, I remember learning about the Tuskegee experiment where the CDC misled people and used them as human guinea pigs. And there's potentially racial overtones to that. You know, I've learned about the potential financial conflicts of interest that exist between regulators at the CDC, people who sit on the Advisory Committee for Immunization Practices, and investments that they've made in the industry that they're meant to regulate. So I'm aware of financial conflicts of interest that makes me a little bit hesitant to, you know, completely swallow everything the CDC says. We've heard from CDC whistleblowers like William J. Thompson, who also is hoping to expose corruption in the organization. So taking that all together, I think it's incredibly irresponsible to write a bill that allows Iowans to be dictated to by the CDC and to put the liberty of Iowans at the mercy of the Centers of Disease Control. That you have rights and liberties until the CDC says so. And that's that, because that's the way we've structured our government. Because unfortunately, rather than going this route of personal responsibility where people can assume their own risk, we just rely totally on government to be our protector and our grantor of health and our grantor of liberties, that instead of looking to God for liberty, we've looked to government. And I think that's very unfortunate. But just thank you, Representative Holt, for elucidating that for the body, that the reason why this language is in there is to satisfy the CDC. And yeah, we got to protect healthcare workers. A lot of them are declining the vaccine. You know, they've been on the front lines. They've seen the carnage. They've seen the patients pass away. And yet they're saying that, hey, you know, maybe I don't want this. And I think it is their concerns that are driving this amendment, because I think that's a very real concern that under this language, where healthcare facilities could exempt people based on vaccination status. How does that affect their employees? And the employees are extremely concerned about this. We know that because they testified in committee and they're in our email inbox. And I certainly hear about it all the time from people at the Jefferson County Health Center and other facilities. So, I mean, it is a real issue, and I think that really is the motivation of this amendment, is to protect the freedom of those healthcare workers, that no matter what, yes, they have the freedom to pursue an emergency use authorized product, but they also have the freedom to decline. And we respect that, and we trust the healthcare workers to make the best decision for themselves. And I think that's what's going to attract top-tier talent to our state, because we know there's a shortage in healthcare workers. It's a big problem that we're trying to solve, and we haven't really done a good job addressing it. I think this would be a step in the right direction, that Iowa tells the world, you want to be a healthcare worker, you want to be a nurse in Iowa, we will protect your freedom at all times. You are a free human being in the state of Iowa because our rights we prize and our liberty we maintain, and we need your help serving our population. So please, healthcare workers, come to the state of Iowa where your freedom will be protected and you'll never be subject, pressured, or coerced, because we know informed consent could never take place in the context of a pressured situation. And read the Des Moines Register just yesterday as evidence of people are being pressured to take this vaccine. The Des Moines Register is advocating that people who don't vaccinated be proactively excluded from society. So if you're comfortable taking that route, if you're comfortable, Representative Holt, following the lead of the Des Moines Register and excluding unvaccinated people from society, then by all means, vote down this amendment. But if we want to protect healthcare facilities, if we want to make sure that freedom is a whole, inviolable, we believe in freedom. Doesn't matter. You don't check your freedom at the door when you walk into the hospital. And I think to Representative Holt's point, you said there's a lot of speculation on what these vaccines do. I think we know what they do. Or at least we know what they do according to this FDA briefing document on the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine, where if you look at the safety profile of this, 18% after the 2-dose series had experienced what they call either a stage 3 or a stage 4 adverse event. And for those who are less familiar with vaccine clinical trials, a stage 3 event is something that disrupts your daily life. A stage 4 event is life-threatening. And for someone like myself, who I believe I've already successfully recovered from the virus, thank God, just thank God for my health, that I don't need a religious exemption. I don't need a medical exemption. I can be a human being. I can read the clinical study and determine for myself whether this is a step I want to take. And if a healthcare facility says, hey, you have to take this or else we're going to not let you visit your best friend who just is recovering from surgery or something, I think that violates informed consent. I think that creates a very dangerous path. And we don't need to guess on where this might go. We see other places in the world rolling this out, and it's incredibly clear this is meant to be coercive. This is meant to create a dragnet to get more people vaccinated, to force it on people. And why would healthcare facilities be exempt when they've had priority access to the vaccine? All their healthcare workers, all their inpatients have had it that want it. So the only possible result of including healthcare exemptions in this bill is to create more pressure and coercion to get more people in the shot that otherwise would have said no. And just look at what the media is saying. That's what they're saying. They say, oh, we need to give people more of a reward to get the shot. We need to, give them a donut or give them permission to go to the movies or give them permission to travel. And then they'll realize the importance of vaccines, because our freedom comes from vaccines. Our freedom comes from Microsoft. Our freedom comes from Pfizer. Our freedom comes from Moderna. It doesn't matter how dangerous this product might be. It doesn't matter if it's been licensed or emergency authorized, or that we need to indemnify the manufacturer because they admit, well, we've only studied it since last year. So what's going to happen and what's going to be the result of lipid nanoparticles, polyethylene glycol in the human system 4 years down the road? We just don't know. And that's why we need to really pump the brakes and explore this issue from the very beginning and really get a clear look at just what's going on, what's at stake in these products, and how does this exemption in the law, how would it apply to Iowans? How would it definitely be used to restrict the freedom of Iowans? And anyone who doesn't necessarily see this, with all due respect, it just seems relatively naive, especially when other countries have made it very clear that this vaccine credentialing system is meant to coerce people and restrict their movement and create a tiered system where you're denying unvaccinated people access to society. It's happening in the world already. It's going to be happening in New York soon. It's here. Europe's moving in this direction already. So anyway, a lot of really important things. I think this is why we needed to get this conversation started last June or in January or February. And I think it's just so important that we really need to put a lot of thought, a lot of time into really exploring these issues and just doing a better job with this bill than forcing it on us on the last minute. So this is an amendment to protect the freedom and liberty of Iowans at all times, because you don't lose your constitutional and God-given liberty when you check yourself into a healthcare facility. So, Mr. Speaker, I move the amendment and ask for a division in a record.
Gentleman from Van Buren moves Amendment 1421, requests division in record. Is there a second? Second by the lady from Warren, Representative Bowden. This is now a record roll call vote. All those in favor should vote aye. All those opposed vote no. The clerk open machine receive your vote. Aye votes no. Andrews votes aye. Cisneros votes aye. Krasik votes no. Have you all now voted? Clerk close machine. The House by tenth results of the vote. Those voting aye, 9. Those voting no, 85. Absent or not voting, 6. The amendment has failed. Clerk, call up the next amendment.
H 1433 by Shipley of Van Buren.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Van Buren, Representative Shipley, for opening remarks on Amendment 1433.
All right, the purpose of this amendment is to really clarify that employees have protection, that employees cannot be mandated to take a COVID-19 vaccination as a condition of employment. This really is restating the law as it presently stands, because under no circumstances should an emergency use authorized product be mandated on anyone. Unfortunately, we haven't really been observing the law so closely, so I think we've heard from at least I've heard from a lot of people that are just bent out of shape, wondering, am I going to be forced to get a vaccine to keep my job? And you ask the question, is that legal? And you keep getting different answers. Well, we don't know what the law says, so we're going to follow the EEOC guidance. And the EEOC guidance under Trump differs markedly than the EEOC guidance under Biden. So this is good language. This has been vetted. Most of this amendment's been vetted by the Senate. It passed the Senate Human Resources Committee. And I was told that there were a lot of senators on board, and then somehow a lobbyist got involved at the last minute, and the people of Iowa were squelched by a well-connected lobbyist who funneled this bill. But the language was vetted by the Senate Human Resources Committee. I've heard other members in the chamber tell me that they are supportive of this language. I did go a little bit further and just clarify that religious exemptions apply to all people at all times. Because for those who follow the pandemic closely, there was an incident last year where a bureaucrat for the state of Iowa was informing school districts that religious exemptions to vaccines don't apply. And while that's one way to interpret the law, I think that's a very uncharitable way to interpret it. And thankfully, the governor was able to step in, but it took a few weeks to get that ironed out. And in the meantime, there was a lot of uncertainty on whether a religious exemption to a vaccine applies during a state of an emergency, irregardless if the pandemic illness is connected with the vaccine, right? Oh, we have a COVID-19 emergency, but you have to mandatorily take a measles shot to attend school. That was kind of the situation we were facing last summer, and thankfully that bureaucrat was corrected, but not by us, by the governor's office. So anyway, this is really good language, just restating what we know the law already says, that employers are not allowed to mandate a COVID-19 vaccine as a condition of employment. And there's lots of reasons on why they shouldn't be allowed to do this, but apparently there's some Still some uncertainty, because I'll read you a text message I got from an old college acquaintance just on Monday. This is my friend Michael. He lives in Coralville. We met when I was in Iowa City, and we haven't stayed in touch too much over the years, but thankfully we've been reconnecting lately. He sent me this on Monday morning. He said the wife's coworker got the jab yesterday, was told by the husband's employer that she had to get it. So this is interesting, that an employer is not making mandates for the employee. They're actually mandating the employee and the employee's family. On what earth that's legal, I don't know, but it's very difficult when the law is unclear and people don't necessarily know what the law says or know how to assert their rights. I mean, even me in this chamber, I have a hard time to figure out how do I actually ask the right question and assert my freedom. So this was a very interesting situation where an employee thought it was legal to not only mandate it for the employee, but also that employer's spouse, and woke up at 4 a.m. unable to breathe and is still hospitalized today, 2 days later. So that's what's happening in Iowa right now, that employers are operating as if they can legally mandate this, and they're coercing people. And we know the pressure is so immense because you read the Des Moines Register where they say, they've been issuing editorials for months now saying that, we need to pressure people into taking this. And so that's been this. Imagine you're an employee and you're being pressured to take this. You don't know what the law says. You see some EEOC guidance from last year. You see different EEOC guidance this year. You don't know what to do. And they're threatening to take your job, which I think that was interesting. To the point I was trying to make earlier about why Jacobson versus Massachusetts is important is because part of that case law is that the penalty incurred for declining the vaccination must be somewhat appropriate or reasonable to the public health impact of your declination. And so in the Jacobson case, it was a $5 fine, roughly, a couple $100 a day. Who knows how that inflation works, and inflation's rising. So, so that was one thing where in that condition, the vaccine was mandated because if you didn't take it, you had to pay $5. But this is, if you don't take the vaccine, you don't have a job. You've lost your livelihood. In Jacobson, it was smallpox, which has an infection fatality rate of about 30%, would be my estimate. Very, very lethal, deadly disease. The COVID infection fatality rate, even among the most vulnerable, is not nearly that high. So when we're threatening to take away people's employment as a condition of the COVID-19 vaccine, to me, it really doesn't seem reasonable, especially for people who've already recovered from the illness. And so obviously there's a lot more to this issue. I just wanted to make sure that religious exemptions apply at all times, because there's been some discrepancies on that, and just making sure that, people have an option to refuse a vaccine, but also a gene therapy or any invasive medical procedure, whatever they come out with next, and that's our right. And just like you don't have to join a union as a condition of employment in the state of Iowa, we're right to work. Why would you have to take a vaccine as a condition of employment? So anyway, this is a very important area of the law to clarify. This language has been vetted by the Senate with some additional language, but it's, I think, a very, very simple proposal that's basically restating what the law already says. And it needs to be clarified because we have employers in Iowa that do believe that they have the ability to override their employees' bodily autonomy, that could take their employment away from them if they don't get a vaccine for a disease that they might not necessarily be at high risk for. This is the thing, because the laws must apply evenly. Everyone must be even under the law. But COVID, as we've seen, does not affect people evenly, that there is a big gradient on who's at risk and who's not. So, when we're measuring out these totalitarian health dictates, I think we really need to take into account that everyone's different and that there are differences. There's gradients. Not everyone's affected in the same way. As we've seen from the clinical research, older people are less likely to experience severe events for the vaccine than younger people are. And vice versa for the virus, that older people are much likely to experience severe events compared to young people. So there are some differences there. There's deltas. There's a lot of room for just nuance and just get to the bottom of what's really going on. But anyway, this is a simple, straight amendment to this bill. and we really clarify that an employer does not have the right to require an employee to take a vaccination as a condition of employment. Those are my opening comments. Happy to take any questions.
Is there discussion? The chair recognizes the gentleman from Crawford, Representative Holt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would question if this amendment is germane.
Will the gentleman from Van Buren and Crawford please approach well? Chair recognizes the gentleman from Van Buren for a motion.
I would move to suspend the rules to consider Amendment H1433 and ask for a division in the record.
Gentleman from Van Buren moves to immediately consider Amendment H1433. Request division in record. Will the clerk open the machine? Cisneros votes aye. Wolf votes no. Losi votes no. Donahue votes no. Hansen votes no. Clerk close machine. The chair is no longer in doubt. The amendment H1433 has failed. Is there? We are now back on discussion for House File 889. Seeing no further discussion, the chair recognizes the gentleman from Crawford, Representative Holt, for closing remarks on House File 889.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Shipley, I will just say one thing to your comments, and he's not in the chamber, but that is a true distortion of facts in reference to what I said. I absolutely did not say that we should do the bidding of the CDC. I merely pointed out the reality that the position our healthcare facilities would be in if they could not follow CDC guidance, and what those facilities, the position of those facilities might be in as they're struggling to try to keep their residents safe while at the same time honoring the rights of those who want to visit their loved ones. You know, everybody was very upset, and rightfully so. It was horrific when you couldn't visit loved ones in nursing homes, when you couldn't visit folks who were sick and dying because of COVID and because of the desire to try to protect. It was a difficult, horrible situation. Many would argue some of those decisions were wrong, and I would agree with that. Having said that, now we have guidance from the CDC with the vaccines in which if you have a vaccine, You can visit your loved ones without a mask and move around. If you don't have a vaccine, you can have a mask, but you can still visit. That's tremendous progress, and I don't know how they're able to issue those guidelines without information. And it is true when, no right is absolute. You can't go into someone's business with your gun if that business owner says you don't get to have a gun in my business, because it's a conflict of two rights. And so we sort of come down on the right of the business owner in that regard. So no right is absolute, and no one is suggesting that anyone could or should be denied health care if they don't get a vaccination. There is a duty of care. Currently in law, this bill doesn't change anything when it comes to health care facilities that is not currently the situation. It doesn't address it. It exempts from the requirements of the bill. That doesn't mean that vaccine passports are encouraged in healthcare facilities. It doesn't change anything. The duty to care, the right to privacy, all of these other issues, all of these other requirements still exist in code. So no one is suggested by exempting healthcare facilities that we think someone should be discriminated against and not allowed to see their loved ones or not admitted into a hospital. Those things won't happen because there is a duty of care. No one is suggesting that those things are right or moral, but the exemption is because of the realities faced by healthcare facilities in trying to protect those they are sworn to protect and take care of in a very difficult situation in long-term care facilities and other things. Representative Shipley also made the point that everybody in the facility could get a vaccine, and so why should we worry about if the vaccine's effective? There could be people in these facilities who, because of health reasons, could not get the vaccine. And so we have to bear that in mind, too. That is a very simplistic response, I believe, Representative Shipley, to a very complex situation. So this has been a very difficult situation for lots of folks. This bill does not go far enough for some, and it goes too far for others. I have done my best to strike a balance on these issues. I have done my best to listen to those who fear for their freedom legitimately and those in healthcare facilities who are just doing their damnedest to figure this out, to navigate it, to take care of the people they're sworn to take care of. It is just not as simplistic as Representative Shipley would like it to be. It isn't. It isn't. No right is absolute. Those folks in those nursing homes also have a right to life for as long as possible. And if their life can be jeopardized because we can't ask somebody if they have a vaccine or not when they come into a healthcare facility, can't go there. Can't go there. So this just isn't as simplistic as some folks would like it to be. It isn't. I absolutely believe that vaccine passports are unacceptable, unconstitutional, and un-American. And I believe I also believe, and I don't agree with a lot of things of the Biden administration, but the Biden administration has come out and said they don't favor or support vaccine passports, in fairness to them. That's been said several times. I don't think Americans will tolerate vaccine passports. We're not Europe. We're not going to tolerate vaccine passports. We're not going to tolerate people not being able to travel without a shot. Not going to happen in America. And if it does start happening in a healthcare facility where they're mandating you have to have a vaccine for care, which they cannot do, or if they mandate you have to have a vaccine before you come in and see your loved ones, we need to come back in here and take action. I don't think that's the intention here. I think the intention is to try to establish protocols to protect the folks that in these medical facilities that we're trying to protect. So there have been accusations that we want to codify discrimination. That's absurd. This doesn't codify discrimination in any way, shape, form, or fashion. It simply leaves the current situation going forward as it pertains to healthcare facilities because of the uniqueness of that situation. It just isn't black and white. We have to recognize reality of what healthcare facilities and long-term health facilities and nursing homes are dealing with and how they're trying to get through this situation. So all other requirements in regard to liberty and privacy in state and federal law remain applicable to healthcare facilities. I will say again, this bill in no way condones or encourages medical facilities to have ID or vaccine passport requirements, but it does recognize reality, CDC requirements, Nobody's saying we have to blindly follow the CDC, but we are trying to use common sense here as these nursing homes and healthcare facilities struggle with what to do. It allows flexibility given the dynamics of the situation and the importance of medical facilities being able to care for and protect their patients and staff. Given the incredible work done by our heroes in nurses' uniforms and doctors' uniforms, it is a little bit insulting to hear some of the terms and references we hear in this debate. And that's not what this is about. Fundamentally, this is a liberty issue. Nobody should be forced to put a chemical in their body, particularly a chemical that is a test, that is in testing, hasn't gone through the normal complete protocols, but was done in good faith to try to protect people. There are people who believe the vaccines don't work, people who believe they do, people who believe they're dangerous, people who believe they're safe. That is not the issue here. The issue is, with all of this going on, I think we can almost all fundamentally agree it should be the choice of the individual whether they get this vaccination or not, based upon their health care situation, based upon their own realities of age, health, and whatever factors they would like to consider. That is what this is about, the right of the individual to choose. Not anti-vaccine, not pro-vaccine, the right of the individual to choose in this situation, in a very difficult situation. People need to choose for themselves. They need to decide for themselves. That's what this is about. This bill says the state of Iowa will not issue any kind of identification saying whether someone's had the vaccination or not, the COVID-19 vaccination, so that could be used in a way to restrict an individual from leading their normal lives, from being able to go in a grocery store or go to a baseball game or go to a movie theater. We're not going to tolerate that. We're not going to allow it. It says that businesses don't do it, because if you do, you won't be eligible for grants or contracts going forward. It doesn't touch the employees. This is an issue that we struggle with, because there's two rights involved here. There's the right of the individual employee, but there's also the right of the business owner. It's not as easy. It's just not that black and white, Representative Shipley. I've got an 80-year-old lady that owns a dress shop in Denison, been there for years and years. It may be closed now, but it was there for a long time. Maybe I'm not exactly right with her age, but she's older. She had the dress shop for a long, long time. Should she have the right, in order to protect her health, to say, if you work for me, you have to have the COVID vaccine? Does she? It's her business. It's her business. You may not like that, but the employee has okay, I don't want the vaccine, I'm going to go work somewhere else. Does an employer have a right to decide what, in their business, how they're going to handle this for their employees? That's the conflict. I am very uncomfortable with big corporations saying you have to have the vaccine or you don't work here, and the implications of that for workers. But we talk about intrusive government all the time. Republicans get very upset when we talk about forcing florists or cakes to cake makers to be forced to participate in gay weddings. But suddenly we're okay with saying, but because I like this, you don't get, no, that for me, that doesn't pass my principle test. I believe that business owners have a right to decide what happens with their own business, and that's difficult for me, and I hope that it doesn't happen, and I frankly think the free market will take care of it. I've already talked to some facilities. I just don't think, as difficult as it is to hire nurses and as difficult as it is to hire CNAs, I got a feeling that there aren't going to be a lot of facilities that are going to mandate that vaccine and cut out how many in the workforce. I just think the free market will take care of that. I think the same thing will be true of businesses. If businesses say you have to have a vaccine to work here, I've got a restaurant in my district that can't even open their normal hours because they can't find people to work. So how many businesses are going to be willing to cut out how many people in the workforce? That's kind of the beauty of the free market system. Sometimes it takes care of this stuff for itself. If things get out of control, we can always come back. This bill doesn't solve every problem. This bill doesn't answer every issue. And I know it does not go far enough for a number of folks, but it makes a strong statement that we believe that this decision should be up to the individual, and the state of Iowa will not condone identification cards that say whether you've taken the vaccine or not. We will not condone businesses not allowing people to come into their grocery stores or whatever because they haven't had a vaccine. We are not going to condone those things, and that sends a strong message across the board about vaccine passports. This is a major step forward, and I think it could be a bipartisan moment because I got a feeling lots of folks think it should be a personal decision regardless of whether you got a D or an R behind your name. So I understand there's people upset on all sides. I did my best to strike a place where I thought principle met with common sense. And that's the point for me. Principle has to meet with common sense when we're talking about healthcare facilities. Again, I think this has to be a deeply personal decision. That is the point of this bill. Mr. Speaker, I move the bill and ask that it be read for the last time and placed on its passage.
Representative Forbes, I had recognized Representative Holt for closing remarks when you had lit up your light, so you're out of order. Chair recognized, or the gentleman from Crawford moves House File 889 be read for the last time, placed on its passage. Are there objections? Chair hears none. Clerk will read.
House File 889, a bill for an act prohibiting the mandatory disclosure of whether a person has received a vaccination for COVID-19, disqualifying certain entities from receiving state grants or contracts, and including effective date provisions being enacted by the General Assembly of the State of Iowa.
The question now is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor of passage vote aye. All those opposed vote no. Clerk will let the machine receive your vote. Anders votes no. Cisneros votes no. Ira Polk votes no. Bennett votes no. Have you all now voted? Clerk close machine. The House may attend to results of the vote. Those voting aye, 52. Those voting no, 33. Absent or not voting, 15. Bill have received a constitutional majority is declared to pass the House. The objection is title. Chair hears none. The title is